For 5 years, I was the quiet engine inside Viridian Capital. My name is Elias Cole, and I'm a quantitative analyst, a quant. While the slick-haired traders on the main floor made their fortunes on gut feelings and bravado, I lived. In a world of pure data, I didn't predict the market. I understood its mathematical soul. My job was to write algorithms that saw patterns the human eye could never detect, executing thousands of trades in the time it takes a human trader to blink. I was good at it. I was loyal. And I was a fool. My magnum opus was Project Chimera. It wasn't just another high-frequency trading HFT algorithm. It was a paradigm shift. Traditional HFT models were predators, designed for speed and aggression, but they were brittle. They shattered during black swan events, sun-predictable market shocks. Chimera was different. It used a multi-layered neural network I'd designed to model not just market data, but market psychology. It could sense the buildup of systemic risk, dynamically adjusting its own aggression, hedging its positions, and even profiting from volatility that would wipe out other funds. It was stable, powerful, and beautiful. It was my baby, my direct superior, Julian Croft. The managing director of the Quantitative Strategies division was everything I was not. He was tall, silver-haired, with a charisma that could charm regulators, and a handshake that felt like a contract. He came from old money and the old school of trading. He didn't understand the complex mathematics behind my work, but he understood power, and he understood results. "Elias, my boy," he'd say, clapping me on the shoulder, his expensive cologne filling my small office. "You're a goddamn artist. This thing, Chimera, it's going to put us on the map. It's going to put me on the board." I didn't mind his ambition. I believed in the symbiosis. I'd build the engine. He drives the car. For 2 years, I refined Chimera, running simulations, backtesting it against every market crash from 1987 to the present. The results were staggering. In every simulation, it not only survived, it thrived. Julian was ecstatic. He scheduled a presentation with the executive board and the primary investors. This was it, the culmination of my life's work. The day of the presentation, I walked into the main boardroom, my laptop in hand, ready to explain the intricacies of my creation. But my name wasn't on the presentation screen. Instead, in bold, stark letters, it read, "Project Titan, a new era in algorithmic trading, presented by Julian Croft." I froze in the doorway. Julian, seeing my confusion, strode over and put a firm hand on my arm, guiding me to a seat in the back row, far from the main table. "Elias, good, you're here," he whispered, his voice smooth as silk but with an undercurrent of cold steel. "It's just a small branding change. Titan sounds stronger, don't you think? More gravitas?" I sat in stunned silence as he began. He didn't just rebrand it, he claimed it. He spoke of his sleepless nights, his breakthrough in risk modeling, his vision. He used my slides, my data, my conclusions. The only change he'd made was to the name and the author. He presented my soul and signed his name to it. The worst part? He was brilliant at it. He translated my complex math into a narrative of power and profit that had the board members drooling. He mentioned me once, a passing reference to the hard work of my dedicated quant team led by yours truly. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. The CEO stood up and shook Julian's hand. "Julian, this is revolutionary. The board is pre-approving a $200 million seed fund for Titan. Get it operational. This is your ticket to the executive." Sweet. My world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from my face. After the board members filed out, patting Julian on the back, he finally sauntered over to me, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. "A great day for the team, eh, Elias?" "The team," I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. "Julian?" "That was my work. All of it." His smile tightened. The charm vanished, replaced by cold, dismissive authority. Our work, Elias. I provided the vision, the resources, the platform. You provided the technical skill. In the corporate world, the man with the platform gets the credit. That's just how it is. That's theft, I said, my voice gaining strength. Be naive, he sneered. I'm offering you a generous project completion bonus of $50,000. And of course, you'll be signing this updated NDA, which includes a non-compete and assigns all intellectual property from your employment period directly to the firm. Under my divisional authority, he slid a folder across the table. It was a gag order, a receipt for the sale of my soul for a price I never agreed to. I won't sign it, I said, standing up. I'm going to HR. I'm going to the CEO. They'll see the truth. Julian chuckled, a low, ugly sound. Will they? Or will they see a disgruntled junior analyst trying to sabotage a $200 million project headed by a managing director on the fast track to the board? Who do you think they're invested in, Elias? You or me? He leaned in closer. Take the money. Be a team player. Or you can find your own way out. Your choice. The injustice of it was a physical blow. It was suffocating. My reputation, my career. The one thing I had built with my own mind, he had stolen it all in a 20-minute presentation. The bonus was an insult. The NDA was a cage. No, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt before. I will not be a party to this. His eyes went flat. Fine, then you're a liability. The next morning, I received a calendar notification. A meeting with Julian and Robert Miller, the head of human resources. I walked in knowing what was coming. Robert, a man whose spine was made of corporate policy jelly, wouldn't even make eye contact. He slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of my performance review from the previous week. A review I had never seen. It was filled with fabrications, fails to integrate with team culture, resistant to senior feedback, lacks strategic vision. At the bottom was Julian's signature. Elias, Robert said, in a monotone that was meant to sound impartial. In light of your recent performance review and your insubordinate behavior following yesterday's board meeting, we've decided that your employment at Viridian Capital is no longer a good fit. We're terminating your contract effective immediately. They offered a tiny severance package contingent on signing the same NDA. I was escorted from the building by security, my personal belongings in a cardboard box. As I stood on the curb watching the monolithic glass tower of Viridian Capital gleam in the afternoon sun, the shock gave way to a cold, crystalline clarity. Julian was right about one thing. Official channels wouldn't work. They were designed to protect people like him from people like me. He had miscalculated, though. He thought he was dealing with a simple, spineless nerd he could steamroll. He saw me as a tool to be used and discarded. He never considered that the man who could build an algorithm as complex as Chimera might also be capable of building a plan. He had stolen my work, destroyed my reputation, and taken my job. He had left me with nothing. Nothing but time. A very particular set of skills and a burning, righteous anger that was now the only thing I had left to invest in. Justice wouldn't be found in a boardroom. It would be delivered. The first week was a blur of impotent rage and despair. I spent my days staring at the termination letter and my nights staring at the ceiling. The injustice was a poison seeping into every corner of my life. My professional network ghosted. Me, a few recruiters who had previously hounded me, suddenly went silent. The story was already out. Elias Cole, the talented but difficult quant who couldn't play ball. Julian hadn't just fired me, he'd blacklisted me. My first predictable move was to consult a lawyer. She was sharp, experienced, and brutally honest. Elias, you have an at-will employment contract and an IP assignment clause, she said, tapping the document I'd signed on my first day. You can claim he stole your idea. He'll claim it was a collaborative work product. They have a falsified performance review? They have the entire corporate machine on their side. You'll spend $100,000 in legal fees to maybe get a settlement that's less than what you'll owe me. They'll bury you in discovery and motions. You can't win this fight in a courtroom. She was right. Julian had built a perfect fortress. Trying to assault it head-on was suicide. I needed to find a secret entrance. I needed to go subterranean. This is where the real work began. I traded my despair for discipline. My small apartment became a war room. I bought a new laptop, scrubbed clean, and used public Wi-Fi and VPNs for everything. My target was no longer just to clear my name, but to understand Julian Croft down to his bones. He was competent, but he was also arrogant. And arrogance creates vulnerabilities. My first break came from a place of shared misery. Maya Singh was a junior officer in the compliance department. I remembered her from the office, always meticulous, always overlooked, a quiet workhorse, who ensured the firm's traders didn't run afoul of the SEC. I knew Julian treated her and her department with disdain, calling them the Business Prevention Unit. I found her on a professional networking site and sent a carefully worded message, asking to buy her a coffee to discuss some compliance questions related to my departure. We met at a small cafe far from the financial district. She was nervous, glancing around as if Julian himself might materialize from the steam of the espresso machine. "I can't really talk about internal matters, Elias," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not asking you to," I said, keeping my tone calm and empathetic. "I just want to understand something, Titan, from a compliance standpoint. A new algorithmic fund of that magnitude. The testing protocols, the risk validation. It must have been a mountain of paperwork. Julian got it approved incredibly fast." I saw a flicker in her eyes. Professional pride, it was. Rushed? She admitted. He pushed it through. Said the board wanted it on a fast track. The documentation was minimal. Minimal how? I pressed gently. "He's not a quant, Maya. He couldn't have built it. He couldn't have validated it. He must have had help, or he cut corners. Big ones." I let the implication hang in the air. She knew it. Anyone with a technical eye knew it. I wasn't asking her to betray the company, was appealing to her professional integrity, which Julian had clearly bulldozed. "There's something else," I said, playing my card. "He's using Titan to secure a board seat. A man who scoffs at compliance, who sees rules as suggestions. What happens when a man like that is making decisions at the very top? Your job gets a lot harder. My guess is he's already breaking the rules." That hit home. She stared into her coffee for a long moment. "I can't make any promises," she said finally, "but I can review the Titan approval package for any procedural anomalies." 2 days later, she sent me an encrypted email with a single attachment. It was a log file, Julian's personal trading account. My blood ran cold as I read it. For the past 6 months, he had been using a simplified, stripped-down version of Chimera's core logic for his own trades. Small, careful trades, designed to fly under the radar. But it was undeniably my architecture. This was more than credit theft. Right. This was front-running. He was using proprietary firm technology developed on company time for personal gain before the fund's launch. It was a clear violation of SEC Rule 10b-5 and a one-way ticket to a federal investigation. This was my first piece of leverage, but it wasn't enough. Viridian's legal team could still spin this, sacrifice Julian to save the firm, and bury me in the process. I needed something that indicted the system itself, something that showed a catastrophic failure of oversight. I dug deeper into Julian. Where did he come from? His official company bio was glossy and perfect. Wharton MBA, a sterling record at 2 other major firms. I spent $500 on professional background check services. It's a kind that dig into educational records and past employment. The report came back with a bombshell. Julian Croft did not have an MBA from Wharton. He had attended for 3 semesters before dropping out. His entire persona, the foundation of his career, was built on a lie. Robert Miller and the HR department had either failed to do the most basic due diligence or they were complicit in the deception. This was my shot at the obstacle. I sent an anonymous, carefully worded email from a disposable Proton mail account to Viridian's chief legal officer, with a blind copy to a publicly listed contact for the firm's external auditing agency. Subject: question regarding executive due diligence protocols to whom it may concern. Could you please clarify Viridian Capital's standard procedure for verifying the educational credentials of its managing directors? Furthermore, what is the protocol for handling internal intellectual property disputes, particularly when a senior executive is accused of appropriating the work of a junior analyst shortly before that analyst's termination? Are these records subject to routine external audit? A concerned shareholder? I didn't make any accusations, just asked questions. Questions that would force the legal department to start digging, and in doing so, they would inevitably uncover the HR failure and the lie at the heart of Julian's career. It wouldn't bring him down, but it would light a fire under Robert Miller's chair and create internal chaos. The real key, the one that would unlock everything, came from Maya a week later. She was terrified, but also determined. I found it. Elias, she whispered over a secure call. The linchpin. It's called Protocol 7 Gamma. She explained that any new HFT algorithm with a potential market exposure over $100 million required a special sign-off from the head of the risk management department, certifying that its internal kill switches and risk limiters had been independently stress-tested. It was a major compliance hurdle. Julian bypassed it, she said, her voice trembling slightly. He submitted a waiver form, claiming the core of Titan was based on a previously approved legacy system. It's a lie, but it would take a technical expert to prove it. And the waiver required a signature. Whose signature? I asked, my heart pounding. Arthur Finch's, she replied. The legendary former head of risk, the man who wrote the protocol. In the first place, a cold dread washed over me. Maya, Arthur Finch retired 3 years ago. He passed away from a heart attack last winter. I know, she said, and I could hear the grim finality in her voice. The signature on the waiver approving the launch of Project Titan is dated 3 months ago. Julian didn't just steal your work and lie about his degree. He forged the signature of a dead man to push his fraudulent fund past the one protocol designed to stop it. That was it. Not just leverage, a nuke, forgery, wire fraud, securities fraud. This wasn't just a corporate squabble anymore. This was a federal crime. And I knew with chilling certainty how I was going to use it. I wouldn't just expose him. I would build a trap using the very system he stole, and I would let his own greed, arrogance, and fraud be the things that sprung it. Having the evidence was one thing. Deploying it was another. A simple anonymous tip to the SEC could still be problematic. Viridian's lawyers would go into overdrive, circling the wagons to contain the damage. They might sacrifice Julian, but they would paint him as a lone wolf, a single bad apple. The Titan Fund, his stolen legacy, might survive under new management. My name would likely be dragged through the mud as a disgruntled employee, the catalyst for a scandal. That wasn't justice. That was just mess. Justice, I decided, had to be poetic. Julian needed to be undone, not by an external force, but by his own creation. The flaw wasn't just in his character. It had to be in his work. He had to be publicly and catastrophically defeated on the very stage he had built for his triumph. My war room evolved. One wall became a timeline of the Titan Fund's launch. Another was covered in Julian's psychological profile. Arrogant, dismissive of details he deemed beneath him, driven by a desperate need for external validation and fundamentally ignorant of the technology he was wielding. His greatest weakness was that he believed he was smarter than the machine I needed to understand the changes he'd made to Chimera. How did he create Titan? He wasn't a programmer. He must have outsourced it. I spent days cross-referencing Viridian's vendor lists with freelance quant developers. I finally found him, a cash-strapped PhD dropout in Eastern Europe I'll call Victor, who had a short-term, high-paying contract with Viridian that ended just before the Titan presentation, under a pseudonym. I commissioned Victor for a small, unrelated project. After building a bit of rapport, I described a hypothetical problem. I have this trading algorithm I wrote, but my boss, a non-technical guy, wants more alpha. He wants higher returns, even if it means more risk. He keeps telling me to take the governor off. Victor's reply was cynical and immediate. The classic executive request. They want a sports car but don't want the brakes. The easiest way is to disable the value at-risk VAR limiters and invert the volatility response. Instead of pulling back in a volatile market, you program it to double down, interpreting volatility as opportunity. It's insane. It prints money in a stable market and blows up the entire fund at the first sign of a real storm. I did a job like that a few months ago for some big American firm. The guy called it unleashing the beast. Moron. My blood turned to ice. It was worse than I thought. Julian hadn't just removed the safety features I'd painstakingly built into Chimera. He had ordered them to be reversed. He'd turned my beautiful, balanced system into a ravenous, stupid predator with a death wish. Chimera was designed to weather a storm. Titan was designed to sail directly into one, convinced it could drink the ocean. This was the core of my plan, the Cascade Failure. I wouldn't need to hack Titan or attack Viridian's servers. I just needed to create the perfect storm. A small, localized tempest that only Titan in its beautiful stupidity would sail into. My skill development phase began. I needed to find the perfect trigger. It had to be an obscure financial instrument, something thinly traded, easily manipulated and unlikely to set off firm-wide alarms, but still visible to Titan's voracious scanners. After weeks of modeling, I found it. A series of notes ETNs linked to the volatility of agricultural futures in a specific emerging market. They were complex, illiquid, and almost completely ignored by major players. But to an algorithm programmed to see any spike in volatility as a buy signal, they would look like pure gold dot. Now for the secondary targets. My first move was against Robert Miller and HR. The anonymous email had already started a fire. I followed it up by sending a single physical document via courier to the personal home address of Viridian's lead independent board member, the one known for being a stickler for corporate governance. The document was a side-by-side comparison of the Wharton MBA alumni registry and Julian's official corporate bio, with the discrepancies circled in red ink. No note, no explanation. Just the facts. It was a ticking time bomb placed not in the office, but on a weekend breakfast table. It would force the board to act, bypassing the legal team's instinct to contain and control. Miller's career was over. He just didn't know it yet. My ally Maya played a crucial, though terrifying, role. I explained the final piece of the plan to her. I needed to know about Titan's kill switch protocols, specifically the one linked to Arthur Finch's forged signature. She dug through the technical specifications, her fingers trembling as she sent me the encrypted file. The irony was almost too perfect to be believed. Arthur Finch, in his wisdom, had built a failsafe into protocol, Sven Gamma, to prevent panicked human traders from interfering with a superior algorithm during a crisis. Any system approved under the protocol had a mandatory algorithmic integrity lock. During periods of extreme market volatility, precisely the kind of event Titan was now programmed to chase. All manual overrides from the trading floor would be disabled for a 15-minute cooling-off period. The system was designed to trust its own logic over that of a panicked human. Julian, in forging the signature of a dead man, had unknowingly locked himself in the car with the monster he had created. He couldn't stop it even if he wanted to. The ghost of the man he disrespected is about to become my most powerful accomplice. The final stage of preparation was personal. This plan required capital. I liquidated my savings, my retirement account, everything. It wasn't much, just over $80,000. I funneled it through a series of offshore accounts to a small, aggressive brokerage that offered high leverage on derivatives. I was about to make a massive, leveraged bet against my own creation. I was taking a short position on the very agricultural ETNs I was going to manipulate. If I was right, their value would spike briefly as Titan bought them up, then plummet. 2-0 as the fund imploded and the artificial demand vanished. The plan was complete. Every piece was in place. The Titan Fund was scheduled to launch in 3 days, with a massive press event and live interviews with Julian on all the major financial networks. He was preparing for his coronation, was preparing to kick the throne out from under him. As I sat in my darkened apartment, the glow of a dozen market charts reflected in my eyes. I felt a tremor of fear. This was real. I was about to risk everything on one perfectly timed catastrophic trade. But beneath the fear was a foundation of cold, hard resolve. He had taken my future. Now I was going to take his D-Day. The morning of the Titan Fund's launch was a media spectacle. I watched on a live stream as Julian Croft, looking impeccable in a charcoal suit, stood on a makeshift stage in the Viridian Capitol lobby. He was flanked by the CEO and broadcast on every major financial news network. He spoke of a new paradigm of conquering market uncertainty and of the visionary technology that would define the next decade of trading. He was accepting the accolades for my work, and he was positively glowing. Titan isn't just an algorithm, he declared, his voice resonating with false confidence. It's a fortress. It doesn't run from risk. It masters it. I almost laughed. Apartment, my war room, was dark except for the light of my 6 monitors. On one screen was Julian's triumphant face. On the others were market feeds, latency charts, and the order book for the obscure agricultural ETNs. My fortress was a single, leveraged, short position. My weapon was a simple script I'd written, set to execute a flood of buy orders for those ETNs from a dozen different shell accounts, creating the illusion of a sudden massive spike in interest. All I needed was the right moment. The fund went live at 10 a.m. EST. For the first hour, everything was calm. Titan performed exactly as Victor had described, making thousands of small, profitable trades in the stable morning market. Julian was doing a live interview, a smug smile plastered on his face as the fund's performance ticker showed it up 0.5% in its first 60 minutes. As you can see, he said to the interviewer, the results speak for themselves. 11:15 a.m., I took a deep breath and executed the script. The effect was instantaneous. My buy orders flooded the thin market for the ETNs. The price, which had been stagnant for months, jumped 7%, then 15%, then 30%. On the global stage, it was a microscopic event, a blip in a forgotten corner of the market. But on Titan's screens, it was a siren's call. I watched Titan's public trading log. For a few seconds, nothing. Then it took the bait. A single multi-million-dollar buy order for the ETNs appeared. Titan's idiotic inverted logic saw the volatility spike not as a trap, but as the opportunity of a lifetime. It was working, but then something happened that I hadn't fully anticipated. The sheer scale of Julian's stupidity revealed itself. He hadn't just inverted the risk parameters. He'd juiced them. Titan wasn't just doubling down, it was going. Elin with the firm's entire $200 million arsenal. The ETN price exploded. 50%, 100%, 200%. Titan was now fighting against my shell accounts, buying everything they were selling, then buying more on the open market, creating a feedback loop of pure artificial insanity. The fund's entire value was being funneled into this one worthless asset. The numbers on my screen were escalating so fast I could barely track them. The $200 million fund was now almost entirely composed of an asset whose real value was effectively zero. On the live newsfeed, the interviewer's face suddenly changed. An aide was whispering frantically in his ear. "Mr. Croft," the interviewer said, his voice tight, "we're getting some unusual readings from the Titan Fund's activity. Can you comment on its massive, sudden position in agricultural volatility notes?" Julian's smile faltered. He glanced at his phone. I could see the color drain from his face. The fortress was crumbling. Panic erupted on the Viridian trading floor. I could imagine the alarms, the shouting. It would be trying to hit the kill switch, but they couldn't. I glanced at the volatility index for the ETN. It was in the stratosphere. Arthur Finch's algorithmic integrity lock was firmly in place. For the next 15 minutes, the machine was in charge. A machine programmed by a fool. My own phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Cole, what did you do?" Julian's voice was a ragged, panicked shriek. The suave master of the universe was gone, replaced by a terrified man watching his world burn down around him. I kept my voice calm, cold, and quiet. "I didn't do anything, Julian. I just created a little weather. Your ship is the one that sailed. Straight into it, shut it down. You're the only one who understands it. There's a manual override code, right? Shut it down," he begged. "Oh, there's an override," I said, savoring the moment. "But you can't use it. Not when the system is under this much stress. It's a feature of Protocol 7 Gamma. You should read the fine print sometime." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "You know, the protocol you had Arthur Finch sign off on? He was always so thorough. He built the lock to protect the algorithm from panicked emotional humans. People just like you." A choked, strangled sound came from the other end of the line. He understood. He was trapped. "You didn't just steal my code, Julian," I said, the words falling like ice chips. "You stole the part you understood the engine, but you threw away the part you didn't. The brakes. And you forged the signature on a document that locked you inside while the car went over the cliff." As the Titan Fund's value plummeted toward zero on the world's television screens, I knew the cascade was nearing its final stage. It was Maya's turn at exactly 11:28 a.m. As chaos consumed Viridian, she hit send. An evidence package was delivered simultaneously to the encrypted tip lines of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Department of Justice, and the personal email inboxes of every single member of Viridian Capital's board of directors. The package contained Julian's personal trading logs, showing months of front-running with a derivative of Chimera, a high-resolution scan of the forged Protocol 7 Gamma waiver, alongside a scan of Arthur Finch's real signature from his employment. Contract a copy of Julian's falsified resume and the confirmation of his dropout status from Wharton Dot, and the piece de resistance, a crystal-clear audio recording of our current phone call. His panicked screams, his admission of being unable to control the fund, my explanation of his fraud. The 15-minute integrity lock expired. The traders on the floor finally regained control. But it was too late. There was nothing left. The Titan Fund, once valued at $200 million, was now worth less than the coffee brewing in their break room. My short position had paid off, turning my life savings into a small fortune. I hung up on Julian's sputtering, incoherent rage. I leaned back in my chair in the silent, dark apartment and watched the digital mushroom cloud rise over Viridian Capital. The execution was complete. The justice, brutally and beautifully proportional, had been delivered. The fallout was not a storm. It was an extinction-level event. Within an hour, the SEC halted trading of Viridian Capital's stock. By the end of the day, Julian Croft was not only fired but was also seen being escorted from the building by two grim-faced men in dark suits who were unmistakably federal agents. The news of the forgery, the resume fraud, and the catastrophic loss of the Titan Fund hit the wires like a coordinated carpet bombing. The public narrative, fueled by the leaked evidence, was devastating. Julian wasn't just a failed executive. He was a con artist. The media crucified him. He was the Icarus of Wall Street. A man whose wax wings were fashioned from lies and who was burned not by the sun, but by the ghost of a man he had disrespected and the genius of a man he had wronged. He lost everything: his job, his reputation, his freedom. He faced a slew of federal charges that would likely put him in a place where charisma and expensive suits counted for nothing. At Viridian, the purge was swift. Robert Miller in HR was fired for gross negligence. The CEO, whose legacy was now tied to the man who perpetrated the biggest fraud in the firm's history, was forced into an early retirement. The firm itself was crippled, facing hundreds of millions in investor lawsuits and a multi-million-dollar fine from the SEC. They had protected the powerful instead of the principled. And the entire rotten structure had collapsed as a result. My role in the affair remained officially in the shadows, but on Wall Street, the truth always finds a way to circulate. The story of the fired quant who engineered a Cascade Failure to destroy the executive who stole his work became the stuff of legend. My name, once blacklisted, was suddenly golden. I wasn't the difficult analyst anymore. I was the guy who checkmated a managing director with his own stolen queen. I didn't feel the elation I had expected. There was no celebratory champagne, no victory dance. Instead, there was a profound and quiet sense of closure. It was the feeling of a great weight being lifted, of a deep wound finally being cauterized. I looked at the profit from my short position enough money to never have to work again. But it wasn't about the money. It was about validation. It was about proving that competence and intelligence, when pushed, could be a more formidable weapon than power and deceit. I had crossed ethical lines. I had manipulated markets and played God with $250 million of other people's money. I had to live with that. But I had done it to correct an injustice that the system itself refused to address. I had delivered a punishment that was not only proportional but poetic. Julian wasn't brought down by a regulator. He was consumed by his own greed, amplified by the very tool he had stolen. It was a clean kill. A week later, I got a call from Isabelle Renaud, the CEO of a rival boutique quantitative firm, a place known for its focus on innovation and its ethical culture. "I'm not going to ask you to confirm or deny the rumors, Elias," she said, her voice sharp and appreciative. "But I've read your original academic papers on multi-layered risk modeling. It's brilliant. And I've seen what happens when that kind of brilliance is mismanaged." She didn't offer me a job. She offered me a partnership. "Come work with us," she said. "Not as an employee, but as the head of a new division. You'll have complete autonomy, full ownership of your intellectual property, and a seat at the table, where decisions are made. We don't build fortresses here. We build laboratories." I accepted. Today, I sit in a spacious corner office overlooking a different part of the city. On a large whiteboard behind me are the first nascent equations of a new project, something far more advanced than Chimera. This time, there is no Julian. There are no stolen presentations or forged signatures. My name is on the door. My name will be on the patent. I did what I had to do. I faced the monster, and I didn't just win. I ensured the monster was devoured by its own reflection. I have my closure, my vindication, and a future I built not just with code, but with cold, calculated, and deeply satisfying justice.